Alright class, we're going to just take what we did yesterday, which was graphing sine and cosine curves with no shifts, and we're going to add only a vertical shift today. So what that does is, our equation is now a for amplitude, and then it's either sine or cosine, depending on what it is, bx, which b is our frequency, which we use to find the period, and then we have plus d. So this is d in this case is our vertical shift. And it tells you where the middle line or node line is. So it's where the location of the middle line. Okay, so that's all we're doing is we're doing what we did yesterday, and we're shifting it up and down. But we're also talking about domain and range. Domain for a sine and cosine curve are always all real numbers, so you could either say it's all real numbers, or in interval notation, if you remember, it is negative infinity to infinity. Range, however, goes from the min value to the max value, because those are the range of values that the sine and cosine curve have. And they are always bracketed because they include those points. Alright, so let's see how this works. We're only going to do... Oh, we'll see how many we get done. So it says graph the following. So first we need to get all our information. My A value is equal to 3, which is my amplitude. My middle line, or my D value, is 2, so the midline should now be at 2. So if I go up to 2, here's now the new middle of the graph. It used to be on 0 for yesterday's notes. So the B value is 1, which means that the period is equal to 2 pi over 1, or 2 pi. Okay, so our period's 2 pi. That means that it's ending at 2 pi. We know that the interval is the period, which is 2 pi, divided by 4. So we're going up, each tick mark is going up by pi over 2. So, and then the amplitude is 3, which means that you go up 3 from the middle line. So if this is at 2, then we're at 5. And if you go down 3, you're at negative 1. So I'm just going to put dots here and here too to know that you go to those graph lines. Now we draw the tick marks on the x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it goes up by pi over 2's. 2 pi over 2 is pi, 3 pi over 2, and then 4 pi over 2 is 2 pi. So now we just graph it. It's a sine curve, and it's positive, so sine starts at the middle line. Positive means it goes up first, then back to the middle, then down to the lower line, and then back to the middle. Be careful on this one because it looks, sometimes people forget to go all the way down to negative 1. And then we have our curve. Then we could state that the domain is negative infinity to infinity, because it always is with sine and cosine curves, because we're only graphing one cycle, but it technically goes on forever. And the range, you look at your bottommost point, which is negative 1, and it goes up to 5. So that's how you do a vertical shift. Same thing as yesterday, just move the midline to, or the node line to the spot it tells you. For example, 2, it tells you that the middle line is at negative 3. So negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. And it tells you the amplitude goes up by a half. So really the top is negative 2.5 and the bottom is negative 3.5. So it's a really tiny graph. That's why I kind of skipped this one. I don't really like this one as much. The period again is 2 pi interval, and we know that because b is equal to 1 again. So the intervals are the same as they were for the last problem. We can just go right ahead and put those on there. Pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And it is a cosine curve. It means it starts at the top at 0, then the middle, then the bottom, then the middle, then the top. So then this is our curve. I know it's kind of tight, but it's because the amplitude is so small, it only goes up and down a half from negative 3. Then we could say our domain is negative infinity to infinity, and our range is between negative 3.5 and negative 2.5. Again, min to max. Alright, let's do 2 more. The period's going to now change, so will the interval. Everything else is very similar. Again, pause the screen or go back if you need to see the other stuff, because I'm kind of keep going. So here we have an amplitude of 1 and a midline moves down, so it's a down 1 shift. The period is equal to 2 pi divided by 3 here. So that's the period of the graph. The interval then is 2 pi over 3 divided by 4, or pi over 6. So I can do that right now. Go up by pi over 6 is pi over 6. 2 pi over 6 is pi over 3. 3 pi over 6 is pi over 2. 4 pi over 6 is 2 pi over 3. So all I did was I simplified all those as I went. Our midline is at -1. -1, and then we're going to go down to -2 and up to 0. So the graph, the top is 0, the middle is here, and the bottom is here. And then we just graph it. This is a negative sine curve. So sine starts at the middle point. Then we go down because it reflected. So down, up, middle, up, middle. It's a reflected sine curve. Okay. Domain and range. Domain is our -infinity to infinity. Range is from -2 up to 0, including those values. Last one. Again, we are starting our middle line at 1, and then we have to go up 3. So 4 is the top, and down 3. 1, 2, 3. So -2. So our graph is going to be here, here, and here. Okay. We also know that, so we dealt with this and this. We have to deal with the period. The period is 2 pi divided by pi over 2. Remember, when you divide by a fraction, you flip it and multiply, so it's going to become 4 pi over pi, or 4. So that means the interval is equal to 4 over 4, or 1. So that means these tick marks go up by 1. Okay, now I can draw my graph. It's a negative cosine graph. So cosine normally started at the top, but it reflects down, and then you go up, and then you go back down. So we have our curve. Alright, so that is a negative cosine graph. And we have all our information. Oh, I forgot my domain and range. The range goes from -2 up to 4. Okay? So that's it. Pretty much the same as yesterday, except for the middle line has shifted, or the node line is shifted, which means that then you have to count up and down the amplitude to get the top and bottom numbers. That's the only new thing today, and domain and range. But really, the domain and range is when you get the amplitude numbers. So, all right, tomorrow we'll do phase shifts, and then we'll be done graphing these two things, and we'll be doing word problems after that. So, see you guys later.